Good evening. I'm Matthew McClendon. I'm the director and CEO of the McNay, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the annual Tobin Distinguished Lecture. The inaugural Tobin Distinguished Lecture was presented in 2000 by designer Ming-Cho Lee in honor of Robert L.B. Tobin, the namesake of the McNay's Tobin Collection of Theater Arts, and a person familiar to many here this evening. I was told yesterday that that first lecture took place in the Tobin Galleries, so it is a testament to how meaningful this series is to see how much it has grown throughout the years. The Tobin Distinguished Lecture brings the best and brightest practitioners of theater arts to the San Antonio audience. Past lecturers include opera director Francesca Zambello, costume designer Jane Greenwood, and last year, Broadway costume designer and, very importantly, former Tobin Theater Fund intern at the McNay, Montana Blanco. Tonight, we welcome back the first repeat lecturer, Susan Hilferty, Tony Award-winning costume and scenic designer who is well represented in the Tobin Collection of Theater Arts and subject of the current exhibition, Something Wicked, Susan Hilferty Costumes, on view in the Brown Gallery and the Tobin Theater Arts Gallery. Next year, we celebrate the 40th anniversary of the McNay's Tobin Wing, given by Margaret Batts Tobin in honor of her son Robert's 50th birthday. The Tobin Collection of Theater Arts is comprised of a library containing 2,000 rare books documenting 500 years of excellence in theater arts and more than 12,000 artworks focused on the theater arts. Today, the Tobin Theater Arts Fund continues Robert L.B. Tobin's work. I'd like to recognize and thank our hosts this evening, the directors of the Tobin Theater Arts Fund, Mel Weingart, president, Linda Hardberger, director, and Robert Perziola, director. Thank you. Mel, Linda, and Robert steward Robert Tobin's legacy through supporting local, national, and international programs that encourage creative thinking artists of all types, resulting in groundbreaking theater designs. Tonight, we find the McNay's core values of integrity, innovation, and excellence expressed in the artistry of Susan Hilferty and in her creative process. Now, to fully introduce our speaker, I'd like to welcome back to the stage Scott Blackshire, curator of the Tobin Collection of Theater Arts. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. And welcome, Matthew, again to the McNay. It's wonderful to have you here. It has also been a pleasure to work with McNay colleagues whose support is crucial to the success of our exhibition and events like tonight. They include Renee Barrio, our head of curatorial affairs, and the entire curatorial department, Christopher Mackey and Brendan Sikoria, our former and current prep head leads, who, along with Skylar Shireman, Alicia Farmer, Michael Martinez, and Erica Cunha, infused energy, effort, and enthusiasm into the installation of the McNay's current theater arts exhibition, Something Wicked, Susan Hilferty Costumes. Tonight, Paul Feuerbacher, Maggie Cruz, and Clayton Price are keeping us connected to our virtual audience through the live stream folks are watching on the McNay's YouTube channel. Yeah, pretty exciting. It's the first time. The Education Department, the McNay's Teen Art Guides, and the Development Office have offered their support as well, but special thanks must be given to Julie Magera. Yes, please. Along with Matthew, I'd also like to express my appreciation for our hosts this evening from the Tobin Theater Arts Fund, Mel Weingart and Linda Hardberger, who are here with us this evening, and Robert Perziola. Matthew mentioned the growth of the Tobin Distinguished Lecture Series from the inaugural talk in Brown Gallery, right up here, to where we are now in Leeper Auditorium. As an example of the power of the Tobin Distinguished Lecture, I'd like to share with you the true story of Arnulfo Maldonado. Arnulfo, as a student of costume designer Margaret Mitchell at the University of Incarnate Word, attended Ming-Cho Lee's first Tobin Distinguished Lecture 20 years ago. Duly inspired, Arnulfo declared his intent to work as a theater designer. He left his hometown of San Antonio and studied with Susan Hilferty, earning a master's degree. Arnulfo Maldonado is one of the most sought-after Broadway scenic designers today. Yeah, it is remarkable. Yeah. It is remarkable to consider the number of people's lives and the culture enriched by one decision of the Tobin Theater Arts Fund to host that first lecture. Indeed, the Tobin Theater Arts Fund makes it possible for us to be here tonight. They also make it possible for me to work on a daily basis with the Tobin Theater Arts Fund Assistant Curator, Kim Neptune. With her deep knowledge of history, commitment to community, and passion for theater and design, Kim has led our efforts to meticulously and prepare our, here we go. She led our exhibition efforts to meticulously prepare and install the Something Wicked costumes. Kim and I agree it has been exhilarating and creatively fulfilling to work with Susan Hilferty and with Susan's colleagues across the globe to bring Something Wicked to San Antonio. In partnership with Susan, a pretty straightforward exhibition idea inspired 4 years ago by an exquisite sculpture I saw, that being her costume for the Queen of Hearts in the musical Wonderland, blossomed into a personal visual narrative that chronicles Susan's design career and celebrates her creative colleagues, the makers, craftspeople, and artisans who seamlessly take her designs from page to stage. Now, when discussing tonight's program, Susan voiced a very strong preference that I do not introduce her with a list of accolades. There are many. Or by naming all of her Broadway productions. Again, there are many. Or heralding her teaching in higher education, stewarding the next generation of theater artists like Arnulfo Maldonado. Frankly, and these are her own words, and everything you want to know about Susan Hilferty is available on susanhilferty.com. So, accordingly, I will respect her wishes, and I will introduce Susan with one word that reflects her persona: collaboration. Energetically working with others, actively engaging the creativity of colleagues, and celebrating their individual contributions to her work is a hallmark of Susan Hilferty's collaborative process. Tonight, we learn more about design from a thoroughly collaborative theater artist. Please welcome Susan Hilferty.
I'm a set and costume designer of the theater. Is my mic on? I realized I should check first. Can you hear me? Oh, you can hear me. You can't hear me back there? If I talk louder like this, how's that? Is that better? Okay. I can even talk without this mic on. I have a big voice. I come from a big family. I'm very loud. Okay. I'm a set and costume designer for the theater. I am a storyteller whose medium is images created for the stage. I'm also a teacher, 25 years at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts. I'm grateful to all of you who have seen the exhibition here, and grateful to the McNay and the Tobin collection for making it possible for me to share my work with you, as well as those of you who are tuning in via live stream. The 2 years of preparation for this exhibit constantly reminded me of the incredible scope of our global community. I'm deeply moved by how my colleagues have affected not only my work, but my life. I'm thinking that this is not really a lecture. Instead, I'm hoping it's a conversation about my practice as a theater artist. We will talk about story itself and the arc of developing an idea to be taken through the design process, culminating in a performance. Later, I will share my process for the opera Aida, originally set to open at the Metropolitan Opera in the fall of 2020. Shut down by the pandemic and is now set to open in 2024. I believe that theater is a living thing, constantly in conversation with current events and the world around us. As a theater artist, I am many things, but most importantly, I'm a collaborator. Most of you who are not theater artists are used to seeing a final product on stage. What you are seeing is often the result of months, sometimes years of work with collaborators to present a story. Something that sets us apart from the other artists here at the McNay is that theater artists never work alone. I am the artist that I am because of the people that I work with. The directors, the writers, composers, actors, artisans, associates and assistants, and many, many, many more. Different stages of the design process require different kinds of collaboration and collaborators. From the beginning, developing a design idea with the director, design team, and often the writer, to the production phase, working with the artisans and other makers, to the final product process of putting the design on stage. The backstage crew, the stage managers, which can include often the orchestra and the maestro. All of these people are an essential part of the collaborative process of making something for the stage. I'm hoping to share with you today a way of learning to look by seeing through my eyes. A blank sheet of paper is the scariest thing for most artists. I hear other artists talk about it, the many ways to get over their fear. Some people sharpen 20 pencils. Some clean the refrigerator. Athol Fugard, the great South African writer with whom I've done over 30 productions, says he waits for the blank piece of paper to look in the other direction before he puts down a mark. My process, which I've come to rely on after years of practice, allows me to find the courage to put something down on paper. What is important to note here is that there is not a way to design a play. In the old days, the acting version of the play had the original ground plan and a costume plot in the back. We thought it was the way to design. Not true. Instead, every production must find its own truth, its own voice. It cannot be forced, it must be discovered. Just as an actor finds their voice in developing a role. And there is not one way to create a world. A good text presents endless possibilities, and that is why the great plays can be done over and over, by finding a center. Articulating a clear point of view is a way, my way, into developing a design. One year, I designed 2 King Lears in New York City, one for Theater for a New Audience, and the other for the public theater. Here is Lear with his daughter. Same text, same story, 2 productions, same year. Lear, Gloucester, the Fool, and Poor Tom in the Storm. Completely different worlds because the point of view that we, the creative teams, brought to the story. Blinded Gloucester and Lear on the Heath. The text is the source of all of our inspiration. The text can be a play, a score, completed, or a draft. It can be spoken, it can be sung, or danced if you're working on a ballet or a musical. No matter what story you are designing, the script must be dog-eared by overuse, marked in, notated. The script is your map. It holds all of the secrets. I mine the text for clues. I'm always looking for the essential elements to begin. Earth, air, fire, and water. I'm looking for cycles, the passing of the seasons, light to dark, morning to night. Cycles are always present in stories about people, and they help us understand the story we are telling. Once we can identify some of what the essential elements of a piece are, we can begin to delve into the more specific visual research that will help us clarify our point of view and identify the story that we are trying to tell. For me, the rehearsal room is a sacred place. It's my church. My process is like an actor's. I try new thoughts and ideas out the way an actor develops their character. I use the word to sketch to say that I am looking, I'm trying, I'm experimenting. It is not permanent. But let's begin at the beginning. Remember, every theater design begins as a story. In order to find our design, we must find our way in, our point of view. So how do we start? Every story has three things: a beginning, a middle, and an end. So let's start with Alice in Wonderland's scenario. Though it was written in 1865, it is a story that continues to speak to readers of all ages. So Alice begins in one place, she falls into a rabbit hole, has a series of adventures, and then she comes out having been changed. Or not. So my point of view toward my telling of Alice could be, young Alice is in a crisis where she's questioning herself, her talents. What is she going to be when she grows up? Alice goes through the rabbit hole and has a series of encounters which confuse and challenge her. She runs into her teachers, the kids that bully her at school, and her mean stepmother. In the end, she stands up for herself and cries, "You are nothing but a deck of cards," and decides she needs to leave home to find herself. Or, young Alice is going through puberty and is confused about herself and her place in the world. Alice goes into the rabbit hole and has a series of encounters in which she confronts her changing body and her changing mind. In the end, she emerges as a young woman, confident in her new self because of her encounters and what she has learned, ready for the next step. Each point of view conjures a different story. A powerful tool that we have at our disposal is to create context. And let me try to explain what I mean by that. Designers work in a visual language. So let's start with visual context. It is one story if someone is wearing a red suit in a red room. It is a different story if someone is wearing a white suit in a red room. Or if there are 20 people in white and a single person in black, different story. So many variables, so many choices. How do we make a choice? To tell all stories, we need a point of view so we know what direction we're taking, so we can begin to make choices. As we saw with Alice in Wonderland or King Lear, our point of view changes the story, even if we are using exactly the same text. So another way to understand how I'm talking about context is to understand how we see the world. A teacher once said, while looking at ancient Greek ruins, everything that you see is contemporary because you were seeing it in this moment. Oh, aha, I thought, oh, learning to look. And who we are also changes what we are looking at. So ask yourself, who you are at this minute is affecting how you see what is in front of you. I'll use myself as an example. I arrived in New York City in the early 80s, an emerging artist with little means who walked everywhere. Never a cab, never enough money. I lived in a cold water flat, toilet in the hall, bathtub in the kitchen. I can draw you a very clear picture of New York City of the time, but only through my experience. So now, imagine that I'm in New York City in the early 80s, but my current age, my current career, and current financial situation, and New York City is a very different place. I don't know that New York City in the 80s. I would have to do serious research to begin to understand what that world was. I would have to look at photos, maybe movies, read a lot. No one in that time who is my current age is still alive to speak about it. Take a minute to imagine how you would have seen the world if you were your current age, whatever it is, 10 years ago. How would it be different? Or if you're old enough, 40 years ago. Even if you grew up in San Antonio, it's different. Everything affects our understanding of the world. Designers must be empathic. They must have empathy for all of the characters they help create. The world we live in, this very moment in time, has a huge impact on the power of the story. The moment the atomic bomb was dropped, the world changed, and with it, how we might tell a story. The pandemic has certainly changed us and how we tell stories. But also our lives change in simple ways that can change how we see the world. The great director Garland Wright, with whom I designed many shows, said that you should do The Tempest 3 times in your life. When you were young, in middle age, and when you're older. The last few lines of the text mean something very different to you at those stages, and you will produce a very different design. The story changes if you believe it's about living rather than dying. Designers, in collaboration with each other and the director, create context. Context is the meeting of culture and the physical world. Culture can be made up of many things, either invented or grounded in reality, and it amounts to the rules of the world. We begin by asking ourselves questions about the world to understand and begin to create the culture. Does the world have a specific religion? Gods? What are the indicators of class? Profession? Status? How do these rules affect the design? What are the visual indicators of culture? This is a great moment to interrupt myself for us to talk about research and creating a culture through what people wear and why. So first of all, why do you wear clothes? I asked that once of a class, and a young woman responded with, "My mama would kill me if I didn't." Good answer. Same reason for Adam and Eve. So you might be wearing clothing for modesty, protection, dealing with the climate, for information, identification, fashion or personal statement, custom, tradition, religion, sentiment, to express emotion like mourning, seduction, as a tool, superstition. Why do you wear clothes? Think about it. So back to research. Point of view and research go hand in hand, each informing and helping to refine the other throughout a design process. And always remember that research automatically has a point of view. Everything is research. Designers are ravenous, omnivorous creatures who eat up culture wherever we go. We store it, we save it, we draw on it constantly. I have traveled the globe through my work as a designer, physically, but also through my imagination. I've traveled to ancient worlds throughout the centuries and even gone to the future and to parallel universes. The way to understand the present and the future is to look to the past. All of this leads to research, which can take many, many forms. As a teacher, I'm always stressing the idea of primary research whenever possible. Primary research is something physical, of the time and place, something you can put your hands on or draw from life. Handling a 19th century frock coat or drawing in a museum is a completely different experience than looking at a photograph of one. This is a moment to celebrate museums and how their archives and collections are a resource for all of us. Museums like the McNay are cultural treasure troves, not only for the objects in the collection, but for the building itself that allows us a small window into understanding life in Texas in the early part of the 20th century. A very specific time frame, but a way to understand the world. So let's take a moment to think how we might use this museum as a research tool. Imagine you are designing a film about a woman artist in Texas set in 1927. Let's think about this space that hopefully you know very, very well. It makes you think about so many things. It's a 24-room Spanish colonial revival mansion that sits on 23 acres. What about the building materials? Just think about the land and how it influences architecture. But understanding culture can be so much more than that. Let's go a little deeper. How do current events affect life here in 1927? We are between the world wars. 1927, you were gathered here. Some of you would have fought in the war. You would have stayed home, but the war would have affected everything about your life. It is less than a decade after the influenza epidemic of 1918 that killed over 50 million people across the globe. More questions. What would they eat? How would they get here? How would they communicate? What would they do for entertainment? What were they reading? So many thoughts that open up so many more thoughts. What would they be wearing? Certainly different from what you are wearing today, but how? And the important question, why? So once you start to answer all of these questions, your design starts to reveal itself. But you can also see that to create a culture, you must answer all of the same questions that you have asked about a real time and a real place. So now that I've shared how I begin to approach a design, I want you to witness my process and how we created a world for the opera Aida. Originally set to open at the Metropolitan Opera in the fall of 2020, everything stopped because of the pandemic. It's now going to open on New Year's Eve, 2024, 4 years later than planned. Like the original production of Aida in 1869, global events have postponed the opening. The principal clothing was not even fully designed at the time. It was only the chorus clothing that was in the shop, and it has now been in boxes for 3 years. The costumes at the time of the shutdown are the images that I will share with you now. The creative team, Michael Mayer, Christine Jones, Kevin Adams, and Mark Grimmer, will regroup in January of 2024 to review, look back, and then move forward with our work, which will possibly shift and change as we hold our designs up to the light of the new age. I chose Aida to share with you because it's a challenge. Even though I've designed over 300 shows, really 400, I'm relatively new to opera. Aida will be only my 5th opera design. Much of my work has been working on plays, many, many new plays that have been given life for the first time. I'm nervous to talk about work that is still so deep in process, but I like a challenge. I believe that theater is a living thing, constantly in conversation with current events and the world around us. Aida feels active, it feels kinetic. Though it is ostensibly a story of an invented ancient time, it presents many themes that are unfortunately very relevant right now. How can we talk about it? How can we think about it? The creative team began by meeting and talking about our different responses to the text and music and shared our initial thoughts about the piece. This beginning is a time of riffing. It is loose and organic. One designer might pick up and riff off another's unfinished thought. This is a thrilling and generative part of the collaborative process, which always leads to visual exploration, or sketching, as I call it. At these meetings, we dig deep into the text. Christine uses the word spineline. Here she chooses words that reveal a way into the text. I find that writing the words out gets them into my subconscious. They stick with me that way. For me, the revelation was understanding the constant violence in the words, bent on conquest, revenge and death from the priests, hate and fury deal a mortal blow, but also about love and hope. Love was born amid the stars. We jumped right into researching ancient Egypt. I spent time with real objects at museums in London, New York City, and Washington, D.C. We all have a responsibility to remember and respect the human element of all of these pieces. I'm looking at the objects, trying to understand materials, texture, color, shape, surfaces, the relationship of the figure to the background, extant garments, sarcophagi, patterns and texture, bas-relief and how clothes are worn, sculpture. The research is extraordinary and at the same time limited. It encompasses approximately 3,000 years. How do you begin to navigate all of that? After we went deeper into our research, we were able to share many discoveries as well as refining our understanding of the opera. The aha moment, the unearthing that opened our vision for Aida, came as we learned more about Auguste Mariette, a French Egyptologist, the director of Egyptian monuments. Mariette established museums of Egyptian antiquities in both Egypt and France, and was considered to be the leading expert in ancient Egyptian culture by both the French and Egyptian governments. Believe it or not, Aida was written within 5 years of Alice in Wonderland. Okay, so get this. In 1868, Mariette proposed an opera set in ancient Egypt to the Khedive, the Viceroy of Egypt, to celebrate the opening of the Suez Canal. Verdi agreed to write the score, and Mariette went on to outline the plot and to design the costumes and the scenery. The costumes and scenery were then held up in the French capital during the Siege of Paris, which happened as a result of the Franco-Prussian War, so Aida was not performed until 1871. So much to uncover in that paragraph. Talk about political overtones from the time of the work. We responded to the violence of the time, the political upheaval, Mariette's role as an Egyptologist and archaeologist. And we read about how conflicted the Suez Canal was for the world and the global impact of the Franco-Prussian War. It matched what we were thinking about the world of Aida. And you may have heard, just like our production, world events held up that opening. As we learned more about Mariette, we realized that his research as an Egyptologist could become part of our research. In looking at Egyptian history, for which we have some evidence, but not any real knowledge about the culture, the costumes, and the customs, how do we, in a responsible way, fill in the gaps? It's the same question when we talk about creating a world for Wicked or an August Wilson play. The challenge of trying to marry history and story is that storytelling shifts the view. No matter how careful a biopic might be, for example, it can never be completely true. Mariette had access to significant primary research in his lifetime of work in Egypt, including architecture, clothing, and culture, which he used for his designs of the sets and costumes for the premiere of Aida. He wrote to his friend and colleague Camille Delocle, "Indeed, I repeat to you, what the Viceroy wants is a purely ancient and Egyptian opera. The sets will be based on historical accounts. The costumes will be designed after bas-reliefs of the Upper Egypt. No effort will be spared in this respect." His Aida and Ramades. Aida and Amnaris and Amonraso. I know I got that wrong, sorry, Mel. When we look at Mariette's designs now, they are clearly seen through European lens of the 1860s, even though Mariette firmly believed that they represented traditional Egyptian clothes. But we are reminded that Aida is a story of fiction, created characters in a created world with music that is not Egyptian. Look, they feel very much like costumes. So Now we acknowledge that we are creating a new culture. It could be the future as well as the past, or what I call a parallel universe, rooted in the ancient world, seen through the lens of now. Historically, many archaeologists have treated their discoveries as loot from battles. You just have to read about the Elgin marbles and its controversial history to know how complex archaeology can be. So the nature of archaeology is part of our storytelling. We begin to see our world as if it was a tomb broken open by contemporary archaeologists, as if the people and objects are revealed but not seen for their human or personal value, but instead as loot to be taken away, humanity not valued. We decided it was a useful metaphor, the complex history of archaeology being a perspective in which to view culture of this world. I'm not going to give you a synopsis. Instead, I will tell you the story that represents my point of view to help you navigate my process and how it influenced the design. So remember, this is my point of view. Aida, an enslaved Ethiopian princess, and the Egyptian captain of the guards, Ramades, fall in love despite their cultural differences and the centuries-long rivalry of Ethiopia and Egypt. They hope to celebrate their love and unite their countries by joining together on the throne of Egypt. Instead, though, because of the intense rivalry between their two cultures and the fact that their nationality makes them enemies, in the end, they are overwhelmed and must die. Amnaris bears responsibility because she allows her jealousy to take Ramades down. The world will continue to pitch these two warring cultures against each other, but in the cycle of life, there is always hope that the next two lovers, whose families are at war, whether or not it's Romeo and Juliet or Maria and Tony, that they will find a way to be free on the earth. And the hope that the Amnarises of the world will stop their actions before it's too late. So now we're ready for the next steps, which are the culminations of all the preparation. I always refer to the process of sketching as thinking with your pencil. Aida takes place at a time of huge upheaval and constant war. It begins with an attack by the Ethiopians on Egypt, a battle eventually won by Ramades. The opening lyrics are, "We have word that Ethiopian warriors have crossed our borders, bent on conquest of Egypt and the Holy Nile." Violence in the opening words. So these sketches represent the broad strokes of my visualization. Aida and all the slaves are in white and gold. Ramades dressed for war, about to receive the honor of leading the army in battle against the Ethiopians. Torn, Aida, because she is Ethiopian, sings, "For whom am I to pray? For whom to cry?" In the end, Aida joins Ramades in the vault, which becomes their tomb, stripped down to their simplest garb, no longer warrior or slave. Yes, they sing, in the stars we shall at last be free, forever free. Amnaris in the beginning, a woman in love with a man. Then, in the middle image, a woman in power who turns it on Ramades because of her jealousy. I'm always so moved for Amnaris at the very end. She understands the terrible scope of her actions. As Aida and Ramades lie dying at the end of the opera, she sings the word pardon. She asks for forgiveness. So here we see the power of the world, the pharaoh and the high priests. These are the priests. They're crying for revenge and vengeance. And Amnaris describes them in the end. "Ah, you villains, vicious beasts with your fangs dripping with blood, who pretend to be priests of the gods." Everyone in the temple is male in black, foreboding and powerful. The triumphal arch ends with the people, the popolo, demanding forgiveness, resulting in the release of the Ethiopian prisoners. The Ethiopians are other, dressed from another culture, for me, connected to the land. Some armed, their natural linen stands out from the Egyptian community. I then organized my rough sketches into boards so that we begin to understand not only the transition, but the beginnings of the world that I've created. We start to put it in context, in relationship to each other. You can start to see what happens when there are 80 chorus members on the stage. It changes, right? So this is the power, we just saw the power, the priests and the soldiers gather talking about impending war. Now we're in the Temple of Ptah. This is the place of power for the priests, here with red stoles to connect them to the fire. In the triumphal arch, the popol of the priests are already assembled on the stage, and now it starts to build. Amnaris enters with young slaves spreading flowers with guards. The pharaoh enters with his guards. Radames enters where he's carried on by his soldiers. Ramphis enters with more priests. And then the Ethiopian prisoners are brought in with more guards. All of this carrying on the spoils of war, the loot. So you can see how now I'm starting to build. I have images from where I start to put it together. Also during this time, I'm meeting with a choreographer, Oleg Glushkov, to understand how the kind of movement he envisions marries with the look of the world. We envision the dance that happens in the middle of the triumphal march as very masculine, danced by soldiers celebrating war. We add weapons. We add a whirling war dance and more soldiers. Throughout this time, the team continues to visualize the world, trying to understand about this chorus of 80 people, all of the performers on stage, what it's like to have 80 people versus 2. Of course, it changes the whole picture. So I love this photo, which showcases the great Christine Jones sketching with a model. The set design is now in at least the 3rd iteration, and the projections and lights are still imagined. So this is the opening of the opera. The figure gives us scale. The hymn of war priests, all in black, with pharaoh in gold, all men. Amnaris's chamber with the women, only women, all in gold and white. The Temple of Ptah, fire, metal, and the slash of red on the priests through their stoles. And the triumphal march. You can see how we're combining, we're working together. Now what happens when we've got people dressed in context in the world that we're creating? And we have so much more to do. So once I've laid out the scope of the design, the next step is to meet with the artisans. And now every artisan is different, whether or not it's the milliner, dressmaker, tailor, jewelry maker, cobbler. And within these many crafts, it depends on each individual artist to interpret my design. As the design teams explored possible visual languages together, we found a common interest in the possibilities that hieroglyphics offered our design. They became a useful entry point into layering the walls, the projections, the clothes, and the world. And yes, we checked with experts so that they were not saying something that was inappropriate. Through the hieroglyphics, I found a way to create fabrics that allowed the popolo specifically to appear as if they had stepped out of the walls or the paintings on the walls. As the designs moved into 3D, I often work on half-size scale form to explore proportion and dimension. Here I'm working on the pleating and the possibility of hieroglyphics. Jean Mignola, a fabric printer and a designer with whom I worked many times, took on this challenge. I roughly designed the pattern and how I thought it would work on the fabric. Jean took my designs and translated them into a beautiful piece of artwork which could be repeated on different fabrics. I shared research, and some of this research you saw before. So the research includes textures, colors, pattern, research for fabric printing, different designs. This is Gene and I looking at the fabrics. He now has done full-scale prints that we can start to look at what the various colors might be. You can see on that page, you can see we're matching colors, mixing colors, making choices. We're doing what's called a repeat in a piece of fabric. How do you print it over and over again to make the yardage? Next is a room. This was a room we filled with all the fabric options, so I could see at a distance what it looked like together, how I could make decisions and make changes. Then we had the fabric printed and pleated, and now you see it on a dress form as I start to get and match the proportion to the scale of the body, a full-size mock-up of what we might be doing. I knew that the fabric would be pleated. It's a traditional way of increasing the circumference of the skirt and the hem. But yet to be worked out was the size of the pleats. So here, you can see us in a shop. This is actually in Dusseldorf, Germany. We're holding up the pleats, the colors, the scale, and we're making final decisions about what it will actually be. Those of you who have seen the exhibit have seen in person the variety of pleats. I've also designed a layer of gold paint that lifts up the pattern that had to be added after the printing and the pleating. So then I meet with Das Gewand in Germany to talk through all of the chorus costumes. My designs reflect so many things: class, slave versus pharaoh, soldiers, etc. You can see here how we developed jewelry and what's called aprons, belts, breastplates. So these are my technical drawings of from what I've interpreted. You've seen some of the research. So now I'm communing or conversing with the artisans. Upstairs, there was a jewelry. You saw some of the jewelry that was made that we've never fit on an actor yet, but that's made from my designs into something that's real. We talk about materials, what it should be. Here you'll see different aprons. This is me making choices about what the aprons might be on the chorus. Choker, and this is a fitting photo. Now we're putting something on a human so we can start to see what the proportion will be on the human body. This is now my sketches of the priests. You can see how I'm connecting them to war and to armor. My technical drawing of the priests, how I work out how I think the proportion will work, and then the artisans take it and translate it into 3D. You can see the hats. Next is we can see priests. These are me working with the priests and the people in the temple on the form. So once again, I'm seeing it on the human body. I can see what it is from the front and the side and the back. We're putting together materials, the print. We're establishing a pattern for what's going to happen with all of the other costumes in the chorus. So putting it on stage is the next big step. It is almost the final part of the collaboration. It's when we bring it all together on the stage. It is the most exhausting and the most exhilarating time. Aida has not been there yet. The technical rehearsals are when we build each moment of the performance, cue by cue. Everyone is seeing it, hearing it together for the first time. Throughout the pre-production period and the rehearsal process, we've been imagining this moment, visualizing, rehearsing. But here we all together at a moment that should truly be chaos, but it always comes together. Imagine director and conductor, musicians, actors, singers, dancers, stage management, wardrobe crew, stagehands, props people, and many, 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 many more. This period can last for a few days and what seems like forever. It is the critical time when we make the piece. We call it building a cue, building the show, minute by minute, second by second. But we're not just building it, we're weighing each brick and asking, is this the right brick? We must always be looking and trying to understand what is being created in front of us and remember our intentions, our point of view. And of course, we have almost 2 years before AIDA goes into tech. But it's not over until it's over. I don't have an example from AIDA to share with you, so I'm going to use a different story. It's a small story to explain how you have to hold on to all the time what your intention is, what your point of view. Wicked started out of town in San Francisco in 2003. We made many changes between San Francisco and New York, and in New York, went through the whole technical process again. We were just about to go into previews, and previews are when the time when we have an audience at night, and then we work during the day. But we're still working over and over. I had an epiphany. We're teching during the day. In Act 2, Nessa Rose, Elphaba's wheelchair-bound sister, becomes the governor of Munchkinland. I had imagined her as coming into power and that her loneliness made her bitter and vain. I imagined her focusing on her beauty and not seeing anyone else. That's what was seen on stage in San Francisco. That's what we were doing through this whole tech process. But suddenly I knew that we had gone in the wrong direction. She should be the opposite. She should be dark and withdrawn, in mourning for her life. So I was also responding to what the gorgeous Michelle Federer was doing in her performance. I was getting in her way. I wasn't helping her. So I ran backstage and found a black coat that Kristen Chenoweth, as Glinda, had worn in a funeral scene that we had cut from the play. I explained to the director, Joe Mantello, and to Michelle, who both agreed that we should try it. We put her in the black coat. We changed her makeup and wig. It worked perfectly. It went into the show. And it's been there for 20 years. As you know, we have almost 2 years before AIDA gets on the stage. We will use this time to visualize, rethink, build, and continue to imagine. And then we will add the final collaborator, you, the audience. But you're going to have to wait until 2024 to come to New York and see how we bring all the elements together for AIDA. Thank you for letting me give you a glimpse into my process. I don't expect anyone to get all the information that goes into every element of the performance, but I do believe you will feel it. I believe if the foundation of the work, the point of view, is consistent and coherent, that the story will be revealed. AIDA was originally supposed to be a co-production with the Bolshoi in Russia. The pandemic stopped it, but Russia's invasion of Ukraine ended it. We have so much to learn, and leaning into the AIDA story can help us. We do not have to move from Egypt and Ethiopia and set it in Russian and Ukraine for the story to have resonance and power. Our imaginations work to make the connection. I just opened a musical on Broadway, Parade. It is a powerful piece that feels like it was written for these times. The company of actors are staged like the audience as witnesses. And on the night of the first preview, there was a group of neo-Nazi protesters at our doors. I believe we must speak out. We need dialogue. We need conversation. I believe that the power of stories is, and always has been, that we can learn and change. I believe that theater is a living thing that adapts to the times. Stories help us meet the world. I believe that my work is inherently political, though I'm not interested in propaganda. I believe the audience needs to be presented with a story and make their own choices. I believe the theater has the power to change us, hopefully for the better, for good. Thank you for letting me circle with you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I think this is the time that you get to ask me some questions.
Yes, exactly. This is the time you get to ask questions. What we'd like to do is we have a decent amount of time, and we have a microphone set up over here. If anyone would like to come up and ask a question, we have our first person already. We ask that you ask a brief question so that Susan can give a full answer and give as many folks an opportunity as possible. So our first question.
Thank you, Scott. Ms. Hilferty, hi.
Hi.
I'm Michael. I'm a docent here.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love that.
And so I lead the tours. And so no matter what age group I brought into that exhibit, the kids just love it. They totally relate to it. And they can get, especially the ones that are in school for theater and that sort of thing, they just gravitated. They just loved it.
It makes me so happy.
Yeah. So I'm curious. You asked a question in your presentation. You said something about thinking about our lives in a different time, and then you said it would be different. And I didn't quite catch it, so I know it was a profound question. What did you ask?
Say it again.
I say, what did you ask? I know it was probably profound. You asked a question, and I missed it.
Oh, I'm not sure.
You said you were talking about.
Oh, yeah. Oh, really, the question was, how do we see the world? And it really, for me, it's about, we sometimes forget, as we know in this political context, that people think the world, everybody sees the world in their way. Oh, this is right and this is wrong. But we sometimes forget that our personal context is so different from anybody else's. And as I said, as a designer, we need to be empathic. We need to understand that every point of view has to be included so that we can see what the struggle is, that we can see what the conflict is in every family, every nation, every school, across the world and across the times.
And what was the question?
Oh, anybody remember? No. Yes. Yeah. So how would myself today see the world 10 years ago? 10 years ago, I wanted you to think about that. I wanted you to think, how would I have seen the world if you're your age? Let's say, I'm not going to ask out, but let's say 25 years ago, how the world would be different if you were your age 25 years ago. You would have eaten different things. You would have gone different places. I'm going to move on and ask if there's another question. I will be around and I can try to help you more with what I'm not trying to, but I actually want to say this is a moment to celebrate the docents and the people who are here at this museum. They have been incredible.
So if
I
you have a
feel
question,
so blessed.
if you have a question, please do step up to the microphone. You can line up and we'll get to you all one by
Hi.
one.
Hi, my name is Jose. I am a fashion designer. What was the moment in your life when you said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
I'll try to do it really quickly. When I was 11, I come from 6 kids. When I was 11 years old, I realized that I started to make all my own clothes. It was the only way that I could survive, that I could have my own identity. I was also an artist. My high school art teacher is sitting right over there, who inspired me. Yay. I always drew. It was wild. 6 kids, no interest in the arts at all in the rest of my family. I don't know where it came. I started performing as when I was in high school as well as drawing, and I was making all my own clothes. And then I went to university, Syracuse University. I was an art major, painting major. I minored in fashion design, and I worked in the costume shop. Then, when I was my junior, I went to London. I never had seen professional theater. I had no idea what it was. And in London, I went constantly to the theater as a class, and it blew my mind. I saw the original Rocky Horror Show. I saw shows it was wild. But the moment that changed, I saw a play by Athol Fugard, the South African writer, who I have then gone on to do over 30 productions with. And in this play, 2 actors, an empty stage, a bulletin board, a desk, and a chair. And at the end of the performance, I was sitting in my seat and I was sobbing. And I thought, I've been to South Africa. I have lived the experiences of these 2 men. And I knew that what I wanted to do was to tell stories. So I didn't say, oh, I'm going to be a theater designer for the rest of my life, but I knew that I was going to tell stories. And the gift, that opening up gift, I've gone on to work with not only with Athol, but John Kani, the great South African actor, in many times. I've worked in South Africa for years. But that moment, it was that moment. But it's one of the things, actually, I talked to a group of young people earlier today, and I was saying that what's really essential for all of us is to find our community. Who are the community? Who are the writers you want to work with? Who are the artists? And this isn't just as an artist, this is everything in your life. Who is your community? And sometimes you have to look very far. Sometimes it's standing right next to you, and sometimes you have to go very far. Next question.
Hi there.
Hi.
It's so nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you.
And at first, I want to say thank you for explaining your creative process to us. I'm personally a poet, and I found a lot of parallels in your process, and you gave me a lot of really good advice for my process as well. So thank you. Wasn't expecting to have it the way, but that's just an awesome add-on. My question for you is, you must be just inundated with so much like feelings and creativity all the time, not only from you, but from everyone around you. I mean, it must be tangible to feel all those vibrations. So I guess my question is, how do you focus your output and steer away from things that just you like to things that you know the play needs? Like, focus that.
And that's actually part of the process. Absolutely. I know, this goes back to you being a poet. My process is an artist process. It's how I actually structure it with cards that I move around in space, just the way a writer will often do. The point of view. It's really why I spoke about it today. I sometimes write it on a piece of paper and I stick it in my pocket. And then when I get lost, you can't believe the questions people, that you get asked how many buttons are there? What size are the buttons? What's the direction of the buttonhole? And, you can get lost in all of those questions if you get. So I take the piece of paper out of my pocket and I go, oh, right. And it will tell me the answer. If my point of view is clear, it will tell me the answer. It's wild. So that's how. But then I'm a bird watcher, and that's how I keep my brain. There's so much going on, and then anywhere in the world, you can take a pair of binoculars and you go outside, and then you just look at a bird. And you're in a completely color, life, the seasons, the cycle, everything is there in that. So should we raise that microphone up a little bit? I don't know if it goes any farther.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
I think this is good. I'm a costume and fashion design student, and my question was, what's the hardest challenges facing costume designers today?
Say that again.
What are the hardest challenges facing costume designers today?
Money. And guess what? Money and time. It's money and time. I mean, though I'll tell you a funny, I'm probably running out of time, a very funny story because those money and time, I'm in the middle of, I did the musical Funny Girl, and it opened a year ago in the middle of Omicron, money and time, and getting all the information I needed. But so when I was reading, in reading about the making of Aida, so I read a book that was all of the letters that people wrote to each other about the making. That's how, and there's one letter in there from the maker of the costumes, and she writes to Mariette, You know, we're on schedule for certain things, but we can't get to the leading lady costumes because we don't have the measurements. I thought, they still have the same problem? You can't get the measurements? So in 1871, right, you costume designers out there, you don't have the measurements, you can't make anything. So, but it really, I mean, I travel a lot, and I've worked in England, and so recently I've been in South Africa and England and in this country. And one of the things that was, I know, but I didn't know until I was there, that the world has changed everywhere. It hasn't just changed here in San Antonio or here, and we forget sometimes. You think it's just, so across the world, we're all trying to navigate what these changes mean for us in whatever it is we're doing, but in storytelling. It's true whether or not you're a composer or a poet or a writer. How are we going to navigate to look into the new world? And I have so much confidence and faith because I told you I believe in the cycles. And after the winter, spring always comes. It comes. And so we will find a way.
So we have time for 2 last questions. Thank you.
I'm Jordan. I'm a chef. I have a layer cake question for you. First of all, I'd like everyone to acknowledge the way you ended your lecture with the "for good" wicked quote. And then
I didn't know if anybody would get it.
And then I wonder if you have any idea about the future of this franchise. I am a fan of Gregory Maguire's source material. Is there any plan for any sort of Broadway movement forward with any of the other material?
I mean, of the Wicked material?
Yes.
I don't know. So right now, in terms of the Broadway production, it's running in Broadway in London, and there's a tour in England, and there's a tour here we're about to, on Halloween of this year is the 20th anniversary of Wicked, believe it or not.
Nice.
Unbelievable. I was a brunette. But also, I'm busy. I believe that it will run for 10 more years. So I'm trying to make a plan for how do we make it happen in this time when there's less money and less time. How do we really keep it and hold on to its integrity? We have amazing producers that have held on to the integrity of that production wherever it happens. And at the same time, there's a movie being made, which is actually going into the story. It's actually, I've just found out it's 2 parts. A close friend, the amazing Paul Tazwell, is designing the costumes for the movie.
So they didn't ask you.
Say it again?
They didn't ask you. They went elsewhere.
That's a
Layer cake. Layer cake.
said, you were looking for the dark side, and I'm looking for the light. I'm telling you, Paul Tazwell is exactly the right person to be designing the movie. I can say that with all love and honesty.
Thank you.
But other than that, I don't know if there's any other plans.
Right.
Gregory Maguire keeps raising his fantastic family as he's going through.
I mean, there's a lot of good things to come.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
But it's a
And-
story, I mean, just to celebrate Wicked for a second, it is a story that continues to move people. But thank you for believing in it. Hey.
And our last question.
Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm a student costume designer. I struggle a lot with confidence, like presenting my designs. So I wanted to know how you build your confidence to present your designs to the world.
You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe. We talked earlier, right? Can I tell the same story that I told you before? Yeah. The answer is in you. It's like Dorothy Gale. You click the answer it's in you, and sometimes you just don't know it. You don't know that you have the brains, the courage, and the heart. And you just have to believe it. It's there, it's in you. Go forward. Yeah.
Thank you.
Susan.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you. Good for you. Thank you.
Susan, on behalf of the McNay, thank you so much for sharing so much of your life with us. I think we can all agree that our perceptions of theater and the work you do has changed, and we will all never see theater the same way again. Thank you. Thank you. So now I would like to encourage you all, if you have the time, to head down to the Brown Gallery where you can see Something Wicked, Susan Hilferty Costumes, until 9 o'clock this evening. The exhibition closes on Sunday afternoon, so bring your friends over the weekend. And then coming up in May, we're excited to present a exhibition of maquettes, small-scale models for the stage called Big Little Stage, and that will run from May 25th through February 25th of next year. Some great artworks that feature process and materials and shows another aspect of designing for theater. So we hope you'll join us for that. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and have a great evening.